Hi, students. I want to talk to you about chapter 1 today. Hang on just a second. Let me pull it up. All right, so chapter 1, before we even start, the very first picture I want to show you is the cover of your book. Hopefully you have your book by now, but if you don't, I hope you get it really soon, okay? I don't want you to get behind. And there's a couple of reasons I chose this book. One is that it's got beautiful pictures. It didn't cost too much. It's got 4 authors right here who are very connected to our national parks, both personally connected and professionally connected. That gives it more credibility in my mind. And that it also looks at our national parks topically. And so we'll talk about that in just a minute. But long before our national parks were created into national parks, there were writers and poets, philosophers, painters who brought awareness to our beautiful landscapes. One of the groups that I want to talk to you about is the Hudson River School. These are painters who brought about these beautiful paintings that look very real and yet almost romanticized, okay? They would go out to these beautiful places. Hudson Valley is in New York, and they would paint. They were landscape painters. Isn't it beautiful? Where do you put yourself in this picture? Can you see yourself there? Would you be in the water? Would you be fly fishing? Or maybe you'd be on a raft coming down this way with your friends. Maybe you're camping over here in this flat area. Or maybe you're sitting up here on the hillside taking in the whole panoramic. Okay, maybe you're there just having a picnic lunch. Or maybe you're there for a week staying with your family. Let's look at another one. Aren't they beautiful? Again, very realistic and yet almost romanticized. That was the style of the Hudson River painters, Hudson River School painters. There are a couple more. All right. Poets. We've got poetry here of John Keats. And he was an English romantic poet dated back to 1789. Okay. Really understood the beauty of the earth. There's another one. This name might be more familiar to you, Henry David Thoreau. He's an American poet and writer and philosopher, and he was born in 1817, again, a long time ago, but loved nature and loved the outdoors, appreciated it so much. Another one who appreciated beautiful outdoor scenery and the trees, especially the trees, John Muir. John Muir, we're going to talk about him often in class, and he is known as the father of our national parks. He was a naturalist, an author, an environmental philosopher. And then we've even included Rachel Carson. She was an American marine biologist. She studied a lot about pollution and the effects of chemicals like fertilizers, pesticides, and so on that we were putting on, and how it was running into our streams and, you know, killing and harming our beautiful streams and wetland areas and so on. Okay. And then of course you recognize this guy, right? Well, imagine how busy President Lincoln was during the Civil War, and imagine him taking some time out to sign legislation which gave Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove to the state of California to save as protected land. Now, that didn't make Yosemite the first national park, but it really got the ball rolling on saving and preserving land, especially for generations. So Yellowstone is actually our first national park, and not just for the United States, but it was really the world's first true national park. And it is a beautiful, beautiful area that you must go see. If you've not been there, you really need to go put that on your list for sure. Okay. And then your book also talks about the Antiquities Act, which was signed back in 1906. And what this did is it gave power to the president to create national monuments out of public land. And he saw maybe that there is some beautiful landmark or a historical or prehistoric structure or scientific interest area or something like that that he wanted to set aside for people to really pay attention to and the next generation to go to and so on. So he could set this aside as national monument, not a national park. That has to be voted by Congress. But oftentimes, a lot of times actually, our national monuments move into becoming national parks, and that gives them more protection. And then in 1916, we have the Origins Act. And what this did was it established the National Park Service. And 1916 is well over 100 years ago. Back then, we only had 14 national parks and 21 national monuments. And we have grown tremendously since then with 62 national parks and hundreds of national monuments, national seashores, national historic sites, national scenic rivers, national byways. I mean, all kinds of things. Those all follow under the National Park Service. They're all protected by the National Park Service. So John Muir invited Teddy Roosevelt to Yosemite Valley with the idea that he is trying to get him to take Yosemite Valley and have it federally protected, not just protected by the state of California, but federally protected. And so this enabled it to become a national park. They camped together for 3 days. Can you imagine taking the president on a camping trip? It worked. All right, that makes me nervous just looking at it. All right, later we have President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, we had just gone through the Great Depression. He was putting together the New Deal, and he wanted desperately to put people back to work. So he created some different organizations. One was called the Civilian Conservation Corps. And this would get people working, and they were going to work for the National Park Service to develop the roads that go through the park, the trails that we go hiking on, campsites, amphitheaters. All of that had to be done by somebody, right? Well, this is the group that got that going. And also during his time period, he transferred land from the War Department's historic sites like Gettysburg to the National Park Service. Again, it'd be better protected under National Park Service, along with monuments in Washington, D.C. Okay, again, more protection. And then they added things. This is where they started adding things like scenic road corridors, especially through the Smoky Mountains National Park, or coastlines. Okay, there it is, Blue Ridge Parkway, excuse me, through Smoky Mountains National Park. Cape Hatteras, that's off the East Coast. Point Reyes, that's here in California. And then there was the Everglades, the story of the Everglades. So I want to get to that in just a second, but let me show you some old archive photos from the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, that went to work to create our beautiful national parks. They got a lot of great pictures online that you can get from way back at this time. It's really interesting to see. All right, let's get to the Everglades. The Everglades, do you know where that is? That's on the southern tip of Florida, down by Miami, okay? And the Everglades was different. It wasn't protected just because of beautiful scenery, even though it is beautiful scenery. That's not the reason it was protected. It was protected for the biodiversity. It has a very unique ecological system there. A lot of swamps, wetlands, marshes, which all attract different kinds of birds and other animals, fish, and so on. So it is very, very diverse, and that's why it was protected, for the ecological region and the biodiversity. Also, we have started saving land as urban national recreation areas, or urban national parks. That means most of us live in cities. And so having these lands, this open area, this space to get fresh air and to enjoy the beautiful views is so much closer when it's called urban parks. In 1978, who was the president? No, it's already printed there for you. Jimmy Carter. He used the Antiquities Act. A lot of presidents, probably most of them, if not all, used the Antiquities Act, which enabled our national park system to grow. And during his time, he added 47 million acres to the national park system. It more than doubled in size during his presidency. Some of these, a lot of it was in Alaska. Some of these national parks were saved as national parks and preserves. And when it has that title preserve on it, that means you are keeping the rights for, like, the Alaska Natives to hunt or fish or gather on these lands. Chances are it was taken from some of them. So it is a very nice way of welcoming them back, that kind of thing. And they can enjoy their more traditional way of life. All right, so I said starting off that this book looks at our national parks in a topical way. So I like to think of it kind of like a piece of fabric where you have, or a weaving, you have the warp and the weft, right? So in other words, you've got all these different national parks and national historic monuments and national seashores and all of that running this way. And right here, you've got all the different topics like the human history, the natural history, the geography, the culture, the science, the social science, the environmental issues, and so on, all meshing together, creating this rich tapestry of depth as we study our parks. And I like that they say when we study our parks, we really are studying the history of the United States at the same time. The national park is not static, okay, the system. What that means is we're growing, not just growing in acreage and growing physically, but growing in depth. We are gaining more and more and more stories about our parks. Most of them very positive, but some of them are negative. Some are hard to hear, right? There was a cost to this land. Somebody may have lived there. Somebody may have been pushed off that land to create this national park. Okay, we have like Manzanita National Historic Site right here in California that was an internment camp. We have Ouachita Battlefield, a National Historic Site. We have Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. So there are lots of areas that have stories, and it's not just one story, it's many stories to this national park. And that's why, I mean, it keeps growing and growing, okay, as different histories are unfolded, as different memories are unfolded. Now, I want to tell you, whatever national park you go to, or as you go to each one, as you go to all of them, however that is, that you go to the visitor center, okay? It's not just for the old people that are there, okay? This is where you really learn about the park. You learn the depth, you learn the stories, you learn the animals that are there, you learn the rivers, the hikes, all kinds of stuff. Everything you want to learn about the park is right there, okay? And if they don't have it there, they will tell you where to find the information, okay? And then you can go camping with your friends. All right, so what I'd like you to do for chapter 1, actually you'll be doing this for every chapter in the textbook, is as you read the chapter, I want you to write down 5 observations. That means 5 things that stand out to you in this chapter. Not 5 things you think I would think stand out, 5 things that you think stand out, okay? Those are the observations, so 5 of those, and then I want you to write 2 discussion questions. Discussion questions are a little deeper level of thinking, okay? So it's not a yes/no question, it's something that would stimulate conversation. All right, that's gonna be what you do for every single chapter, okay? All right, so 5 observations, 2 discussion questions. How you'll turn that in is under assignments, it will say chapter 1, you'll turn it in and then it will go under the grading of chapter 1. All right, I'll see you next time.